Welcome to Straight Up Dog Talk, the podcast where pet parents, pet guardians, and pet professionals come together to dive into real issues in dog parenting. From controversial training methods to sensitive health topics, we're getting raw and real about what it means to care for our canine companions. Join us every Wednesday for unfiltered conversations, expert insights, and personal stories that will make you laugh, cry, and grow as a pet parent. No topic is off limits and no question goes unanswered. You won't get one perspective here. You'll get them all because every dog is different and every human is too. You can follow along on Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook at Straight Up Dog Talk or by visiting www.straightupdogtalk.com. Tune in from any of your favorite podcast platforms. Welcome to Straight Up Dog Talk. We are back this week with a returned guest, Ashley from Like the Breeders. How are you doing tonight, Ashley?
I am doing great, and I'm very excited to be back to talk about this with you. Thank you so much for having me again.
Absolutely. This is just it's a relevant topic and it will always be relevant. And unfortunately, it's a hard conversation to continue to keep having. But if we don't keep having it, then we're not educating people. And if we're not educating people, then we're part of the problem. So I think that you just have so much information. You have your own whole thing going on, especially because being in California and all the stuff that's going on there, you just are really in this world. And it's really good to have somebody that we can turn to and talk to when we have hard questions to ask about rescues and what to look for in rescues and how we identify puppy mills and backyard breeders. And a lot of the feedback from your episode was specifically, can we go more into detail how to stop these things, how to report these things, and also give us a little bit more information on what laws there are out there and how we can apply those to these situations and, hopefully advance some change. So I'm going to kind of just let you lead the way tonight, and I'll pop in with my questions when I have them, and we'll go from there. So start wherever you want to start, the backyard breeders and puppy mill situation, or even the rescues, and just inform the listeners.
That sounds good. I'd say the most kind of recent update, and I know we're recording a little bit in advance, so definitely take this with a grain of salt. Things may change between now and when this is published. But the most recent thing that has happened is in LA City, they've issued a temporary moratorium on the issuance of breeding permits, which on the surface seems fantastic. And it does give me hope that we can do things and there can be legislation put in place to help curb this issue of overpopulation that we're seeing. The problem is that even though we have this now in LA City, it's just specific to LA City. And LA City, it doesn't obviously encompass all of LA County. It doesn't encompass all of California. So it's just this small little pocket, essentially, of where people can no longer get these breeding permits to be able to breed dogs. And the other issue with it is that it doesn't really do anything to be able to crack down on breeders who don't have permits, or backyard breeders who, are just out there trying to make puppies so that they can make money. There's no real, from what I've been able to see, solid way to enforce this moratorium on the breeding permits and breeding in the city. So to me, it almost, and this is going to sound very cynical, but it almost kind of came across as the city council in LA just being able to say, oh, well, we did something, and, we heard you and we did something, and be sure to vote for us in an upcoming election because we protected the dogs. But there's no real accountability or enforcement of this from what I've seen. And I can't even, it's so weird because when stuff like this passes or there's, bills on the table, it's so hard to sometimes even find the exact wording or the exact bill to be able to read. You can find all the news reports on it, but when it comes down to actually tracking down the written bill and the written mandate that they're putting out, it's not easily found. I could not find it. So how are we supposed to even know what is going on when you can't even find the exact wording easily and read through it all? It's confusing. It's unenforceable. It's hard to really understand what it is. So there's obviously still a lot of room for improvement, but there's hope that there are people in power who want to make these changes and are willing to make those changes, but maybe just don't even know how to actually implement them in a way that's going to be meaningful and actually make a change. So that's kind of the biggest news since we last spoke. But obviously, it would be much better if this had been kind of a statewide thing, because, if you want to go buy a golden retriever puppy and you live in Los Angeles and all of a sudden people aren't allowed to breed golden retrievers in Los Angeles, it's not like you can't just, go south to Orange County or head to the Central Coast and find a breeder that's not that far. You can hop in your car and drive if you're willing to brave the traffic. So it's not a huge deterrent is kind of the problem. It's not going to really slow anything down as far as I'm concerned.
Well, and I mean, this is again where we go back to the point where we talk about how like things probably need to be done on like a national federal level, because if we're trying to just fix this county by county or even state to state, we're really only affecting small areas, because where I live is 4 hours from several other big cities: Chicago, Milwaukee, Madison, Lewis. Seriously, 4 or 5 hours in any direction that you go, you end up somewhere way more fun than here. People are willing to drive that to go on vacation for a weekend. Of course, they're going to be willing to do that, to drive to get the dog, that the breed of dog that they're looking for. There's definitely a lot of rules that probably need to be put into place, and there's no structure at all right now, and not having accessibility to it is another problem. Also, I think that what a lot of people don't think about in regards to when things get political is that the people who make the laws live a different lifestyle than most of us in this demographic. I don't own my own house. I am on disability, and the paychecks that the people who make the laws are much than your everyday average American. And so they're not looking at the problem the same way that we're looking at the problem, because they're probably not actually even really affected by it. Because if they have a dog, they probably did go to a breeder and pay an excessive amount of money for the dog, and they didn't think twice about it. Didn't think about what their options were or what the local shelter population was or anything like that. So I think that when we talk about those laws being made, we need to think about, if we're going to stand up and try to affect this kind of change that we want, we really have to be involved in the political climate. And I think a lot of people in the dog community just don't want to do that. And I get it. I didn't want to be involved either. And now here I am being involved. So I think
Right.
that that's a huge part of it.
The political side of it and the trying to introduce legislation that's going to make meaningful change, it's not fun. A lot of people, when they get into rescue or they get into trying to help dogs, they do it because they think it's going to be fluffy, fluffy puppies and cute dogs, and they're going to just like have a great time and it's going to be happy and wonderful. And the reality is, this is not fun. This is heartbreaking and this is really difficult. I think it's good that there are some laws and bills that are trying to be passed that are going to hopefully make a difference. But it's also so important to really look at what we are trying to pass and figure out, like, will this work? For example, I don't know if we talked about this last time, but Bowie's Law here in California, where it was basically legislation that mandated that before any shelter could euthanize a dog, they had to make it available for 72 hours and alert the public that that dog was going to be euthanized if nobody came within 72 hours. It sounds like a really good thing on the surface, but when you kind of dig into it and you really think about it a little bit more, like, I understand the point of it was to identify the dogs that were really at need in the shelters, like which ones are on the chopping block first, and then we triage it, right? You prioritize it. But the problem with it, just kind of based on some of the experience that I have volunteering with shelters and working very closely with the executive director of a shelter, is that if it were me and I were running this shelter, and nobody's ever going to hire me to run a shelter after I say what I'm about to say, but if that law went into effect and I was running a shelter, the first thing that I would do for any dog coming off a stray hold would be put it on that 72-hour notice, because you've got to be able to make space for all of these dogs that are coming through the door. And you can't just keep cramming them into kennels, waiting for that 72 hours to pass and have there be some sort of like rhyme or reason to it. I mean, yes, there is some logic that goes into why certain dogs are euthanized and which ones do end up being on the chopping block first. A couple weeks ago, one of the Riverside shelters took in 113 small dogs from a hoarding case in one day. 113 dogs. Sad, it sucks, but you've got to be able to make space for all those dogs that are coming in. And so the logical thing, I think, for any shelter director that Bowie's law passed would have been, okay, you know what? The second stray holds are up, every dog is going to be on a 72-hour notice because we've got to be able to make that space to accommodate all these dogs that are coming in. So the legislation is great and the pushing for it is great, but you've also got to do it in a way that's going to be effective. And so with this LA City ban, it's like, okay, well, this is great, but who's going to enforce this? Who's going to go out and, make sure that people aren't breeding? Because basically they're not supposed to be breeding anymore unless they have a permit that's going to expire within the next year. And once those permits expire, who's going to go out and make sure that even though those permits have expired, that those people who were breeding are not going to keep breeding? It's great that there's movement, but there's just movement that's not really functional and not going to make the change that needs to be made.
I think that that's part of the whole problem with this is that there's people out there saying, we're helping, we're helping. You're helping, but there has to be some kind of process. There has to be some kind of cycle because if we just keep doing these things that just eliminate something or make it look like we're affecting change when we're actually probably making the situation more difficult because we haven't provided a solution. This is what's going to happen after. These are going to be the requirements moving forward. We are going to have to add animal control people to start checking these and things like that. There are definitely things that we could utilize in the system that are probably not being utilized without anybody even thinking twice about it, because you could absolutely send animal control 90% of the time. If they're not out there getting dogs, they're just sitting there at their desk waiting for a call to go pick up a dog. Why aren't we having animal control go out and do permit checks? Why aren't they going out and making sure that isn't a backyard breeder and breaking up the situation, giving them a fine, whatever? Is it going to make their job more difficult? Is it going to give their job probably more things that have to be done on a day-to-day basis? Yes, but if we want to make changes, we're going to have to change not just the laws. We're going to have to change the enforcement of the laws, and we're going to have to change how the whole system as a whole works together. This isn't little change we're talking about. We're talking about big change. And when there's big change, that means there's a lot of little tiny steps that have to be taken first. And you're really good at identifying that, hey, this is great, but where can we fit this into the rest of the structure so that it benefits everyone as a whole, so that we're helping these dogs instead of limiting ourselves and now still dealing with the same problem because there's no repercussions for the change that you're trying to make.
Exactly, exactly. And I think that kind of also comes into play in terms of this can't just be a regional thing or even a state thing. It has to be on a national level at this point. I'll tell you this story. It was the most infuriating thing last week. I was at the airport dropping off some crates to ship back to a partner of ours. And this guy comes in, and this is in Orange County, where we've got plenty of huskies. We've got so many huskies in shelters here. It is wild. I get emails of huskies, adults, seniors, and puppies that are on the euthanasia list in our local shelters. And I kid you not, this guy comes to pick up his purebred Siberian husky that he had purchased from a breeder out of state and had flown into Southern California, where we have plenty of huskies. And even if we have those bans in certain cities or certain counties, people are still flying these purebred breeder dogs in. It doesn't make any sense. My mind was just blown. I'm just sitting there looking at this guy with his perfect little husky puppy. And I'm like, I can show you a litter of like 5 at the Riverside shelter right now that are just as cute that you wouldn't have needed to fly in from out of state. It just doesn't make sense to be, especially high impacted dogs, like breeding high impacted dogs, that there's just so dang many of them. And it just kind of goes to show that it's got to be kind of on a national level and everyone being on the same page and having the laws kind of be universal throughout, because yes, we stopped breeding in Los Angeles City and that's great, and there's nobody breeding huskies in LA City, but that's not going to stop someone from finding a breeder out of state and flying a husky puppy in from out of state. It's just not. So
And
it's so important.
it happens out of country too. Now, for the sake of the argument, because that's what we do here, I
Yeah.
can see why people are importing like Malinois or Cane Corsos because we're doing specific things with these dogs. We're getting them for the police force. We're getting them for protection dogs for the army or SWAT or whatever reason. But there's a specific purpose that we're bringing these dogs here. We can't just take certain rescue dogs without knowing their history or their temperament or anything like that and say, this is now a dog that works for the police force. Because unfortunately, that's not how it's going to work all of the time. Not all of the dogs that are in the shelters are bred specifically for those things. Their family lines, their bloodlines, they're breeding for those specific things, those traits, those instinctual behaviors. And that's not, unfortunately, what puppy mills are doing. Puppy mills are taking it to the point where we're not worried about allergies and we're not worried about if this is going to cause a reactive litter, and we're not worried about what actually we're doing when we're breeding these mismatched pairs of dogs. We're not taking into account those considerations. So I can see if we're bringing dogs across state lines or in from other countries, if there is a working purpose for it, specifically for service dogs or dogs that work for police department, the government, anything like that, where we need a very specific temperament and a very specific job, I can see where there's an argument for that. But those 5 puppies were just as cute as that puppy that he flew in from out of state. And I don't understand why you wouldn't just look locally and see what your options are. And I know that there's an argument out there that, I mean, I've talked to plenty of people who've had the same conversation with me, is that it's hard to rescue because rescues have high expectations and requirements. And one of the things that I now have started asking rescues when I'm interviewing is, do you require people to have a yard? Because that is the hardest part for most people, is that they don't have a yard because they live in an apartment, but they want a dog, and they'll take the dog on hikes, and they are going to take the dog on walks around the parking lot or the neighborhood or whatever, but the rescue will not approve them because they don't have a fenced in yard. And again, here's another situation where today's society is impacting people from being able to contribute because they're in a totally different financial level than they could be, because housing costs is so much higher than it was 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago. And since we had that recent housing bubble happen, there are houses here that have doubled in value. Younger and younger and younger people are not able to purchase houses. So I think that rescues also maybe need to look at what they're doing as far as these are our qualifications, and find ways that are more creative to help get some of these puppies into homes without such high level requirements.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And I think there's kind of two different aspects to what you just talked about. So I'll quickly just dive into both. Yeah, I agree with you. I'm probably going to take some heat for this, but I think that there is room for breeding in certain situations, like for people with disabilities or for police work or for military work. That makes complete sense to me. I think where I have trouble is the average person probably doesn't need a perfect purebred puppy. It's a preference, right? It's not a need. And I work in personal finance, and we always talk about like needs versus wants within your budget. You need something to survive, but you don't need the ice cream. You just want the ice cream. You want that purebred dog, but the vast majority of people don't need an amazingly trained purebred German Shepherd or service dog or whatever. The vast majority of people can adopt a dog, and that dog has the capability of being fine for that person if they're willing to put in the work and if they're willing to train. And that's going to be the same with any dog that you get, even from a breeder. If you get a dog from a breeder or you get a dog from a shelter, you're going to have to train that dog regardless of where it comes from. It's going to take effort. Coming from a breeder doesn't mean it's going to be perfect and it's going to know everything. And you're not going to have to worry about potty training it or teaching it basic obedience or crate training it. All dogs take work, regardless of where they come from. I'm sorry, it just is what it is.
It's true.
Yeah,
Dogs
but
don't just know.
exactly. Yeah. Your dog is not just going to automatically know how to interact with your kid. Your dog may not automatically know how to interact with the cat in your home or the other dog in your home. Your dog is not automatically going to know where to go to the bathroom. It's just not going to
Dog's
know.
not going to know how to interact with you.
Yes, your dog is just not going to know unless you put in the time and the effort to train your dog. So, yeah, for me, there is room for breeding in certain situations, but the vast majority of people just don't need a breeder dog. That's just my opinion on it. And in terms of rescues, I run a very small rescue. So I'm kind of involved in that world a bit. And for me, I think the reason why people would say that we make it hard to rescue from our organization is because I'm just perpetually terrified by what people are capable of. And that's the
That's fair
reality.
too.
Like a lot of rescues, they have these really strict requirements for adopters, and most of them come from things that we have seen happen that we don't want to see happen again. And so a lot of it is, at least for me, I know it's very fear driven. We're a very small foster based organization. So unless I am confident that the dog that you are getting from us is going to be a great match for you and you are up for it and ready for training and up for whatever comes along with it, I'm probably not going to put that dog in your home because I can't have that dog bouncing back to me. I don't have a physical facility to put it in. So if it bounces back to me, it's going to be in my home with every other dog that has potential that could potentially bounce back to me. And then I'm going to have, 50 dogs in my house that have bounced back because I was too willy-nilly on where I put those dogs. But in terms of the housing arrangement that people have for the dogs, I've put hunting dogs in apartments before because the adopter was like, I'm going to take this dog on hikes every day. I'm going to take this dog to the dog park every day. This dog is going to have so much exercise. It comes down to the lifestyle and making that lifestyle match. And I feel like a lot of rescues are kind of going in that way where they just want it to be a good match. And I feel like a lot of the negativity that rescues are kind of getting these days is because they are taking heat for not giving the adopters the dog that they applied for and trying to give the adopters the dog that's actually going to fit into their lifestyle. I feel like that's why people go to breeders, right? They want a certain breed. And so when they try to adopt from a rescue, they see a certain dog and they're like, I want that dog. And it doesn't matter if it's not the right fit for them. They want that dog. And then when the rescue's like, well, this dog has needs that's not going to be able to fit into what your schedule is and what your lifestyle is and what's going to work for you, then they're just like, rescue is so hard and, blah, blah, blah. But those are the same people that aren't actually going to like go to the shelter and adopt a free dog from the shelter. The shelters like don't even do applications.
This is where we get dogs in the board and train facilities that get abused and traumatized, and that's a whole different conversation. But those are the same people they're not going to ask for help either. So now we have
Right.
dogs that are getting returned to the shelter again for different reasons because they weren't willing to ask for help and try to figure out how to help their dog mentally and emotionally as well. I mean, and
Exactly.
then there's people like me who agree to take a dog, and then this dog ends up being crazy high energy. I have to learn a lot about myself as well as learn a lot about my dog, and then invest all of this time and energy into changing my whole lifestyle so that my dog's lifestyle is successful. And not everybody's like that. Not everybody's willing to
Exactly.
do that, which is why it's important for the rescues to investigate you. This is why they do the home visits. This is why, if you have other dogs, they want the dogs to interact. This is why they ask you so many questions about your personal lifestyle. It's just like adopting a child. You're not just going to give a baby away to anybody who says they want a baby. That just seems absolutely ludicrous to me. So, why do we expect that that's what's going to happen with dogs?
And it can happen if you go to your, local county shelter. I know adopting from the Riverside shelter, all you really need is a pulse. Like that's it. You show them your driver's license, they see that you're breathing, and you can take whatever dog that you want. And it's like, okay, you say that adopting from a rescue is so hard, then go and do it from a shelter if you want it to be easy. But then, obviously the problem is a lot of those dogs, like you said, they do end up bouncing back and they've got even worse behavioral problems than they had before they left because the people didn't have that adoption counseling. They didn't have a rescue that had resources to help them in terms of like training or veterinary resources or where I'm super hands-on with our adopters. I'm total helicopter parent. I check in regularly. I tell them if you adopt a dog from us, you're also adopting me. I just come along with it, essentially. The reason I think a lot of rescues do that is because we've just seen too many dogs bounce back and we've seen too many just sketchy situations where if you don't do that due diligence and you don't make people essentially jump through some hoops, then that dog can end up in a really bad situation and end up right back at the same kill shelter that you pulled it from originally.
I don't think that there's anything wrong with putting them through hoops. The episode for Carly should have aired already. She's an ethical breeder, and she talks about the hoops that she puts people through if they're going to purchase a dog from her. And it should be that way on both
Right.
sides. It doesn't matter if you're adopting or if you're purchasing, there should be hoops. There should be checks. There should be contract. There should be the dog gets returned here, and that's end of the story if anything happens. It should be about the dog's welfare. And that's the biggest part in all of this is that people don't understand that the dog has rights too, and the dog's needs need to be met. It's like this horror stories that I'm hearing about people coming into rescues and filling out the forms and saying things on these forms like, I want a white boxer with blue eyes and two spots on its left leg, and it has to have a docked tail, and I want its ears to be one up and one down, and it cannot weigh any more than 75 pounds. And I'm like, that actually happens? That is
Oh, yeah.
astonishing to me.
People think that getting a dog is essentially ordering a custom piece of furniture from their favorite furniture store. It's wild. The best one I think was this gal applied with us and she wanted a dog with certain measurements of legs and a certain body type and it had to have a certain kind of fur. It had to be hypoallergenic because she was a distance runner, but she also had allergies and she wanted the dog to be able to go on super long runs with her. I mean, I'm
How do
reading
you
this
even figure
email
that
from her
out?
and I'm just like, is this real or is this a joke? Like what? And she was dead serious. I was like, well, we don't have a dog like that for you, but I'll be sure to let you know if one comes in. Like, what do
I
you even say to that? It's just so interesting. But I think kind of going back to your point in terms of regardless of where you get a dog, whether it's through a rescue or whether it's through a breeder, there should be some hoops that you're jumping through. And if you are buying a dog and there aren't any hoops, that should be a big red flag
red
for you
flag.
that is not a good situation because and again I know I use the term ethical loosely because I feel like no breeding is ethical right now given the amount of euthanasia that's going on, but any ethical breeder is probably going to have you jump through some hoops and answer some questions and make sure that you're going to be a good fit for their dog. And any backyard breeder is just going to be like, you've got $500, you've got $1,000, you've got $2,000. That is great. That's the only qualifications you need. Here's your dog. I'll take my money and thank you.
Well, let me put a definition out there too, because I'm sure that there are listeners going, well, what does Emily think an ethical breeder is? I think an ethical breeder is someone who breeds for the quality of the breed, the health of the breed, the overall health conditions. We need to be making sure that, these dogs are not going to be prone to allergies. I'm talking about purebred dogs that are bred
No wolfadoodles.
specific thing. No wolfadoodles, no boxadoodles, no weird things. We're not talking
No
about
doodles.
weird things. I mean, doodles serve a purpose, and I totally understand what the purpose is. Doodle is not the right dog for me. I do know that. But I understand why people need them and why they utilize them. And they actually make super great service dogs for anybody who's wondering. They make excellent service dogs. But the ethical breeder is about quality health quality of the dog. A puppy mill or backyard breeder is about quantity and how quickly they can pop out the puppies and how quickly they can make money. It has nothing to do when it comes to health testing or health concerns. And they're not looking at things like OFAs or DNA checks or any of that other stuff that a legitimate breeder for the breed is looking into. Puppy mill and backyard breeder people, they don't care about that. They probably don't even know about that. And also, ethical breeders, it's not about the money. It usually is about breed preservation and making sure that we have healthy lines to breed and continue having that specific breed of dog around. And they will limit the number of times that the female dog can have litters. It's not just a free for all. And every time we can have a litter of puppies, we're having a litter of puppies and we're accidentally getting moms pregnant by their sons and all kinds of crossovers and ridiculous things happening because we're not actually concerned about what we're producing. We're just trying to get it out there and sell the puppies and grab our cash. Back in the day, when I was little, people would go and sell puppies in parking lots. I don't see that happening as much now because of things like Craigslist and stuff. But essentially, if you're buying from a backyard breeder, that's literally what you're doing. You're going to the parking lot at Walmart and you're buying a puppy out of the back of somebody's truck. If you're going to somebody who is an ethical breeder, you're going to somebody who dedicates all of their time and their energy into this specific breed of dogs, and they're not making a crap ton of money on it. They're not, because they're paying for the things like the health testing and the DNA tests and all to provide that information with you. They're paying for shots, they're paying for microchips, they're paying for deworming. Backyard breeders and puppy mills are not doing those things. So I think those are things that need to take into consideration when you're looking at both ends of the spectrum. Rescue is going to assist you with things. Ethical breeders are going to assist you with some things. Puppy mill and backyard breeders are not going to assist you with anything, and they are going to ghost you the second that dog is in your car and not in their hands.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, they're just not going to provide any support. I think the kind of the unfortunate thing with the breeders that are more concerned about the health of their dogs is that there's a reason that these backyard breeders exist. And it's because they are seeing these ethical breeders having such a demand for their dogs, having wait lists, because they aren't necessarily breeding as quickly. And so they're seeing a supply demand issue and they're
Mhm.
taking advantage of that. It kind of is a bummer that the ethical breeders are essentially helping to almost create the market for it, because if these backyard breeders didn't see that there was such a demand for these purebred dogs, I mean, golden retrievers, purebred labs, whatever it is, then they probably wouldn't be viewing this as a great way to make a quick buck. And it's unfortunate because on one hand, the breed preservation and the health preservation and everything, but on the other hand, it's almost creating even more of a problem because it's causing these people to put more dogs out there that haven't, been screened and don't have the health backgrounds and all of that. So I don't know like how you find
Well,
that.
see, that's where I think the regulations and the rules and, having to pay for a license and being checked for that license and having some kind of system in place where there are checks and balances so that we can actually determine you have a permit to be doing this. You're providing testing, you're providing microchips, you're providing, these vaccines. These are all things that you have to do. And if you're not doing that, then you are considered in this category and now your dogs are being taken away from you and we're not allowing this to happen anymore. And do they have regular house checks after that point? Probably, because clearly they've already violated the law at one point now, and so we've had to kind of shuffle around. I think that in the same sense that we're talking about owners being responsible and having to jump through hoops, we need to talk about breeders and
Yeah.
having to jump through hoops. I think that they need to jump through hoops too. I mean, the thing is, and I've said this to you before, is that if we don't have people breeding dogs, at some point, we are not going to have dogs anymore. So there's a really fine line where there's a balance that we need to find where we have the dogs, because 10 years from now, if we have stopped all breeding for 10 years and we've only adopted all of these dogs out of shelters, where are the new dogs going to come from?
I think there's still so many stray dogs out there. I can't imagine whether it's in the United States or it's overseas or whatever. This problem, it's definitely not just like a United States issue. I mean, there's dogs everywhere. Even if we like completely wiped out breeding in the United States, there would still undoubtedly be dogs. I don't think there will ever be a day where there's no dogs if we were just like, all right, no more breeding because there's just so many out there. Like, what was the stat? There was one rescue, I think, that estimated that there's like 50,000 street dogs in Los Angeles County. And as long as there's still unaltered dogs as strays running around, I mean, we're never going to be able to catch all those dogs. Like, how would
No,
there's so many, and if they keep procreating, then there's always going to be dogs. I think the issue would be that if we aren't breeding certain breeds, then maybe those breeds will cease to exist. I'm the first one to say I love golden retrievers. My first dog that I had was a golden retriever. She was the love of my life, my soul dog. I will never get over the loss of her. She was everything. But for me now, being in rescue, and again, everybody's going to have their opinion on this, but I would gladly live in a world that did not have any more golden retrievers if it meant that dogs were not dying in shelters anymore. Because my want for a golden retriever is just a want. You know, these dogs, they deserve to live. They don't deserve to be dying in shelters. And so my want, for me at least, it's not more important than these dogs who didn't ask to be here. The breeder dogs didn't ask to be bred. The street dogs didn't ask to be bred. Like none of these dogs asked to be here. They're all just here because we're not spaying and neutering and we're buying dogs and whatnot. But my want for a golden retriever doesn't overshadow these dogs deserving to have a home. And that's being in the rescue industry and seeing all the death and sadness and just absolute horror on a daily basis, constantly, all day, every day.
and it's a fair point because there are rescues that have these purebred dogs that are also still dying. But I think that it kind of, this is another, I love to play devil's advocate. I'm so sorry. I always do this.
It's okay.
There are people like you and I who are totally fine having a mutt. I don't really have a breed preference. I'm okay getting the dog that isn't purebred and I got it from the shelter, but maybe now I need to have a service dog. So I might actually have to have a purebred dog. I might have to have a dog that specifically meets certain needs for me medically. And again, that will always be my argument is the working dogs. But there are also going to be people who have preferences that are different than ours. And taking away their ability to choose isn't fair either.
I mean, you make a good point there. I think for me, my kind of counter to that would be to encourage people to think beyond what they want and think more about what good can I do when I bring a dog into my home? Is going to a breeder to get a high demand breed, is that going to make a positive impact in the life of a dog that really, really needs it? Or is it more important to me to go to the shelter and find a dog that is running out of time, that could end up euthanized at any point, even if the dog isn't on the red list at a shelter? These dogs are getting euthanized at any point if they start to show any signs of kennel stress or they come down with kennel cough because everything's so overloaded. They're so overpopulated in the shelters that these diseases are just running rampant. So for me, it's like we're in this crisis and everybody has the opportunity to do something to fix it and to make a difference and to save a life. And the vast majority of people, they don't need a purebred dog. It's a preference. But is your preference to have the dog that looks good and is going to be Instagram worthy and is going to get you like 100,000 followers on Instagram and the brand deals? Or do you want the dog that really needed you to show up for it and save its life? And that's kind of the thing that I encourage people to think about when they're thinking about
And
getting
I
a dog.
agree. Do your research, but also, again, here's another thing I'm going to throw at you. Not
Okay,
everybody
bring it on.
can handle. Not everybody can handle those behavioral issues or those special need dogs. Not everyone is cut out for a dog that has been through a traumatic series of events and now has behavioral issues that need to be taken care of, helped, assisted, go through special training, go through behavioral training, see a vet behaviorist. And not every case is that extreme. But I mean, I rescued Toby. He was a bait dog. He was practically feral. He was so abused and he was so mean and he bit literally everyone, including my mother and my sister's boyfriend. Everybody told me to take him back. Everyone told me to take him back. Look at him now. Not everyone can do that. And I recognize that because sure that I could do that again. It was traumatic for me too. That was a lot of time and a lot of energy and a lot of stress on both ends. Now that I'm training dogs, I look at things a little bit differently from that perspective too, because there are people out there, like you said, getting dogs that is not fit for their lifestyle, and then they are now stressed out and they are at max capacity. And that's not healthy for them. And it's not healthy for the dog. And now we're causing issues in other directions. So either now the person keeps this dog and suffers because of it, because they made a poor choice. Now both them and the dog are suffering, or they take it to the shelter where this dog could potentially be rescued or unalived. And neither of those situations are good. All of the options are kind of potentially bad in every direction that we look. So it really does have to come down to the person and what the person can handle. Because if you bring a dog into your home and now you're stressed out about this dog being reactive, you're now making the dog more reactive in a different type of reactivity, because reactive is a blanket statement, right? It's undesirable behavior is reactivity.
Right.
But there's fear, there's aggression, there's ripping things up. There's all kinds of different ways. We can also see dogs being nervous or unsettled, and there's all kinds of different behaviors that are associated with reactivity. And with the wrong combination of people, that could go very badly. Child could get bit, an adult could get bit, the dog could end up getting hurt for some reason because maybe it's jumping the fence. I mean, I've had dogs come into the clinic before that were impaled on a fence because the fence was almost just tall enough, but now the dog has been jumping over the fence and they keep putting things up
Oh,
higher and higher and higher. And now the dog's impaled on the fence because the owner didn't actually work with the behavior problem. They just tried to fix it in however they thought that they could fix it without having to pay money, which is a huge thing for a lot of people. And I think that that's where a lot of people hesitate to rescue, is because they're like, oh, this dog might be traumatized. I might have to invest more time. I might have to invest more money. I just want to go and get a dog that I know is evenly tempered and whatever. But to those people, I will also say you can go and get a dog from an ethical breeder or even a puppy mill and have it be bred as a golden retriever or a doodle or whatever. You can still get a reactive dog because it's just in its nature. Dogs have mental health issues too. So no matter what you do, your dog is not going to be perfect. And everything that you see on Instagram is 5 or 6 or 7 seconds of someone's life. And maybe it took them 15 times to record that 7 seconds. So their dog isn't perfect either. So you should never believe that your dog is going to be perfect like that dog you saw on Instagram, because there are no perfect dogs. They're living creatures that make mistakes just like humans do and have thoughts just like humans do, and we need to respect them as much as we would like to be respected ourselves. And I think that is the most important thing, is that we need to start taking accountability for what we're doing as people and stop trying to find ways to make a quick buck by abusing another person or living being in order to do that, to get that gratification for ourselves, because it's not okay. It's not okay. And the whole system is just messed up. And unfortunately, I don't see a direct way out of where we're at all right now without some really serious laws and structure and investigations. I mean, across the board. I don't know how we do that. I'm going to keep working with you till we figure out how we do it, because
yeah.
I want to be part of it for sure. This is a huge thing that we need to get some control over, but I just don't know how we do it. At this
Yeah.
point, it's just like, and that's why I think that a lot of things like what's happened in California have happened, because they're like, okay, we're affecting change, we're affecting change, we're affecting change. But then that's where the buck stops. And then
Yeah.
it just creates more problems. And now are finding different routes and alternatives to get the things that we are desiring. And it didn't actually fix anything. So I think that people just, they take a couple of steps and then they give up. And I'm not that kind of person, and I know you're not that kind of person. So, if we could just find more people. So, if you're listening to this episode and you want to help, message me and Ashley and say, okay, I have this idea, or I know something that would help, or how can we all band together? Let's work together and actually figure out how to help dogs, because there should not be 2,000 dogs every 6 months dying in one shelter. It's not okay. None of it's okay. It's just it's
Yeah,
awful.
it's wild. The sad thing is right now it only seems to be getting worse. It doesn't seem to be getting better, which is mind-blowing to me that it's only seeming to get worse. But yeah, I mean, we need stronger legislation. We need national legislation. I think we need funding for more animal control officers to be able to investigate stuff like this. We need stronger welfare laws for sure. There's just so many things that need to be done and so much education that continues to need to be done because there's still so many people that have no idea that this is happening. I'll run into people and start talking with them about rescue and I'll tell them, "Oh yeah, the Riverside shelters are doing mass euthanasias every week." And they're just like, "Really?" And I'm like, "Are you living under a rock? How do people not know about this?" And I get that ignorance is bliss, but we need people to be aware of this and we need people to be sharing about this because as long as everybody's kind of living under their rock and clueless as to what's going on, we just don't have enough voices to be able to push for the change that desperately needs to happen. And if we have more voices and we can be louder and we can push for those changes, then maybe, just maybe, we'll start to find ourselves coming out of this horrific nightmare that we're all in right now.
Yeah, and it's definitely going to take a lot of work and a lot of time and a lot of patience to get there. And I just don't know, like I said, I just don't know where we start. So definitely it's an awareness issue for sure, right? So we need to be sharing, we need to be liking, we need to be helping out flag the breeders, and we need to be helping other accounts in this rescues. We need to be sharing dogs. And I know that you guys, it's hard to see it in your stories, and Bridget referenced this in her episode too, that it's hard. It's hard to see this. It's hard to work in rescue. It's hard to work in veterinary medicine. It is not a field that is for everyone. And it's not just all fluffy puppies and kitties and good times. There are really bad, terrible things that happen behind the scenes. And that's kind of what this podcast is about. We're trying to show you that there are things out there that need your time, they need your attention, they need your volunteer, they need your donations, and you need to be looking for the smaller rescues, the legitimate smaller rescues. The bigger rescues have funding. The rescues that have hundreds of dogs and big names and they're all over your social media, those rescues have funding. We're talking about small rescues in not big cities that are outside of your normal metropolitan area and have dogs literally sometimes in shacks. And we're talking about helping those dogs too. So get involved, do your research. If you have questions, you can always reach out to me. You can always reach out to Ashley. We're getting really close to having to wrap this episode up. So, is there anything additionally that you would like to plug in really quickly before we have to sign off for tonight?
Yeah, I think the only thing that I would have to say is if you've listened to this episode or you listened to our previous episode and you're willing to share it, please share it because the education piece is so critically important. The more people who know what's going on, the better our chances of changing things. And the other thing is if you think that you've got a backyard breeder living next to you or living on your street, or you see something that doesn't feel right, call your local animal control agency and say something. Have an agent come out and have an officer come out and take a look and evaluate it to make sure that it's a good situation and not a bad situation. Because the only way I think that we're going to really be able for private citizens to do their part to help crack down on this is to say something and to help those officers find these backyard breeders because they've gotten to the point where they're so sophisticated that they know don't sell your puppies out of your house. Meet the buyer at the parking lot, meet the buyer at the park, meet the buyer at the grocery store. Don't let them come to your house. So it's up to our community members to step up and look around and be aware. And if you see something, say something.
I think that is the most important thing about this conversation is If you see something, say something. If you have a question, ask it. If you don't know what you're looking for in a dog, do your research. There are plenty of people on the internet that can tell you about their breeds and the kind of dog that they have and the kind of activity levels that it requires and enrichment and all of the things. There are so many resources out there, guys. And I'm trying to put them together all in one place for you as fast as I can, but I can only go one episode at a time here. So just keep listening and don't be afraid to reach out and ask for help, because the only way that we can make these changes and we can stop these terrible things from happening is by taking action. Not in a, we don't want to be in a, do it in a bad way. Let's not do it in a bad way. Let's not be violent. Let's not be rude to each other. Let's be respectful and actually try to move forward in a good way that benefits us and it benefits the dogs and it benefits the entire community, because we don't need to make it worse in any way at all. We don't need to make it worse. It's already bad enough and it's pretty ugly at bad enough. So let's not make it worse, guys. If you have questions, Ashley's page will be tagged here again. You can always reach out to me. And if you're interested in learning more about how to adopt a dog or where to find a local rescue in your area, you know where to go. Thank you, Ashley, for being here again. You know that she'll be back, guys, because there's always going to be more to have conversations about in this rescue world. So thank you again, Ashley.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. And we will see you guys next week on Straight Up Dog Talk. Straight Up Dog Talk was created by Emily Breslin. It is edited and produced under the supervision of Straight Up Dog Talk, LLC, and Emily Breslin. If you're enjoying this podcast, follow or subscribe and be sure you don't miss an episode. And leave us a review on your favorite podcast platform. Looking for more honest and relatable dog content? Check out our sister show, Unpacked, with Jerry Sheriff and Madison Simpson. Thanks for listening to Straight Up Dog Talk. See you next week.